खवातीन वेलकम बैक टू एपिसोड ऑफ थॉट बिहाइंड थिंग्स। आज हमारे साथ मौजूद है एक बहुत ही खास मेहमान जिनको बुलाने के दो मकसद थे। पहला मकसद ये था कि शी हैज़ अ ह्यूज एक्सपीरियंस इन डेवलपमेंट इकोनॉमिक्स, पॉवर्टी एलिविएशन एंड मेरा थोड़ा आजकल फ्लो ऐसा हुआ है कि आई वांट टू अंडरस्टैंड कि पाकिस्तान के जो हार्ड कोर पॉवर्टी के मसले हैं उनके कोई पोटेंशियल सोल्यूशंस आ सकते हैं, नहीं आ सकते। व्हाट आर सम ऑफ द कोर फंडामेंटल स्ट्रक्चरल चेंजेस जिसकी हम बात करते हैं, उसमें क्या चीज़ें हम बेहतर कर सकते हैं जिसमें वी कैन एक्चुअली बिगिन टू गो टूवर्ड्स सस्टेनेबल डेवलपमेंट एंड सस्टेनेबल ग्रोथ एंड जो हम सारे कीवर्ड सुनते हैं वो एक्चुअली हम कर सकें। बट दूसरा जो मोर इम्पॉर्टेंटली शी इज़ अ ग्रेजुएट फ्रॉम हार्वर्ड यूनिवर्सिटी and she runs a very interesting program which helps send a lot of Pakistanis to Ivy League schools in the US. And so I really wanted to understand, because you know that I've been a long-term advocate of sending Pakistanis abroad. मैं बिल्कुल भी उस चीज़ में बिलीव नहीं करता कि ब्रेन ड्रेन होता है मॉडर्न डे के अंदर। पाकिस्तानीज़ बाहर जाते हैं तो वो एक आपका सरमाया होते हैं। दे गिव बैक इन मैनी डिफरेंट वेज, वेदर दैट बी इट थ्रू रेमिटेंस, वेदर दैट्स थ्रू सॉफ्ट पावर। अगर रिसेंटली हमने देखा था मोदी वेंट टू द US, वहाँ पर जो डायस्पोरा था ही मेट ऑल ऑफ देम, एंड वो एक सॉफ्ट पावर होती है जो कि आपको इवेंचुअली हेल्प करती है। सो पाकिस्तानीज़ गोइंग अब्रॉड is actually a very good thing. What's important is that जब वो जा रहे हैं तो हम उनको तरीके से डेवलप करके भेजें ताकि वो ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा ग्रो कर सकें और रेलिवेंट जगहों पे जा सकें। एंड उसमें she runs a very interesting program. I'd love to know more about it. We have with us today Miss Shanza Khan. She's the founder and CEO of Eye on IV. Thank you so much for being part of the show.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Muzamil. Thank you.
मैं थोड़ा सा कॉन्वर्जेसन को स्टार्ट करूँगा। पहले तो मुझे ये बताएं कि What's Eye on IV?
So जी, Eye on IV is an educational organization. हम 3 किस्म के काम करते हैं. We do college counseling, helping students identify the best fit college for them anywhere in the world. And then helping them with their requisite personal statements, building their CV, interview prep, whatever is needed. I think जो हम सबसे ज़रूरी काम करते हैं is actually in our second division, which is profile building. We work with class 9 से लेके class 11 के बच्चे, helping them identify their academic passion through psychometric testing, figuring out what they really want to study versus okay, these might be financially good careers for them. Kyunki, as Pakistani parents, and I'm a mom of 3, we tend to think there are certain careers like medicine, like engineering, like computers, which are the most financially viable. And we don't really look at, is this a good fit for my child? Do they have the aptitude in this particular field? तो हम उधर से बात शुरू करते हैं, the actual tests and analysis. And then we do what we call on-ground testing. So let's say the tests come out with, this kid would be a good architect. We would give them internship opportunities, volunteer opportunities, and other program opportunities related to architecture to make sure this is a good fit for them or not. हमने इस लिहाज से more than 60 MOUs sign किए हुए हैं with local organizations, but also international organizations as well. And then our third division is international competitions. And this goes all the way down till 2nd grade. And depending on whatever area of interest a child has, whether it is geography, whether it is journalism, whether it is IT, this way they can compete and see where they stand. So, it's good to have interests and also to have a reality check. What is your level of proficiency in that interest? And unless you compete, you will not know.
Interesting. मुझे ये बताएं कि what compelled you to get into this? Because again, मैं आपकी प्रोफाइल देख रहा हूँ. Masters in Public Policy, Harvard University, Bachelor's in Economics from Emory, and you graduated at the age of 19. That's insane. You start आपने 16 पे किया था?
So I started undergrad when I was 17 years old.
And you graduated top of your class?
I graduated top of my class with a summa cum laude.
So that's mind-numbing. But even professionally, we're looking at the World Bank, Asian Development Bank, the Federal Reserve Bank, Khan Development Network. It's incredible. And so one would imagine a very different career trajectory. What compelled you to come towards education consultancy?
So I spent 22 years in the development sector, Muzamil, working with these institutes, and I learned a lot. We can talk about that a little bit later. But the reason I pivoted to education, and in fact, increasingly my policy work is also related to education, is because if you want to make a difference in people's lives, if you want to have that fulfilling impact, for me at least, it had to be that interaction, one family at a time. And so the need to create Eye on Ivy actually stemmed when I moved back to Pakistan 4.5 years ago. At that point in time, my daughter, who's the eldest, वो class 8 में थी. And I went to her school and I asked, आपके पास क्या opportunities हैं class 8 student के लिए to intern, to volunteer work? और उसके school counselors ने मुझे देखा और कहा कि आप क्यों आई हुई हैं हमारे पास? And I tried to explain to them कि देखिए, I want my daughter to build her character along with building her portfolio, and unless you start at this particular age, A levels was when they were telling me आप हमारे पास A1 में आए हैं, उस वक्त शुरू करते हैं. And having gone through this process myself, I know as far as America is concerned, the clock starts ticking in class 9. Your academics count from class 9. इस पे भी बहुत there are a lot of misconceptions कि आपके सिर्फ O level final grades count करते हैं और A level के grades count करते हैं, and kids themselves don't realize that their transcripts are going from grade 9 onwards. As well as you are competing against other countries. You're competing against the Chinese, you're competing against the Indians, you're competing against kids from Singapore when you're applying as an international. And the competition is now so intense that they're really looking at, have you got published research as a high school student? So this process needs to start from as early as grade 9. And that's the reason the more I looked around this space in Pakistan, I realized that things had not changed when I went to high school, which was at the Convent of Jesus and Mary. उस वक्त कोई ज़्यादा opportunities नहीं थी, but उस वक्त frankly था competition भी नहीं था. This is the early to mid 90s. You didn't require all of this. Whereas now when I look at the level of competition, half of the students in any given class, आप city school को देख लें, Beacon House को देख लें, are applying overseas. So you have intense competition from within the pool, Pakistan, and you're also competing against kids who are, really academically, who have hunkered down and who are doing well. So this space of profile building is what drew me to start Eye on Ivy, because I wanted to create a culture of work at the high school level, which is something we're still working for, and we're constantly creating new engagements. And this is where we tell organizations that, listen, this is how you can give back. This would be, doubling into or tapping into your CSR programs. We realize that it is more work for you to get a high school student vis-a-vis an undergrad student. आप लम से बच्चा उठा लें, आप IBA से बच्चा उठा लें. Yes, you'll get more out of them, and it's less hours for you to train them. But realize that we now need to train kids younger than that. And so we've started getting some good responses on that. Many organizations have stepped up, have created that space and structured program for these students, which didn't exist before. And so that is something, that I feel really happy about, really pleased about, that this is something new that we're doing. It's not on an ad hoc basis. Isse pehle, what typically happens, and what still happens in some other cities, we tend to tap into our social networks. We'll ask our parents, चाचा हैं, मामू हैं, वो किस ऑर्गेनाइजेशन में बैठे हुए हैं, वो हमें इंटर्नशिप करा देंगे. एंड फिर then it's more about getting the letter than actually learning. So it's about, I served here, but what did you actually learn? And so we have an understanding with the organizations that if the student is tardy, if the student is not delivering their tasks, they will not get a letter at the end of it. So the purpose is not to walk away with just a letter, but the purpose is actually to learn and get on-ground experience.
Makes sense. How many cities are you operating in right now?
So we have a national presence.
Right.
We are the in-school counselors for 8 schools, but we get private students from across Pakistan and increasingly internationally as well.
And in-school counseling, what does that mean? So do you have full-time presence of your counselors in schools?
So it's interesting. The world has evolved.
Right.
We are the in-school counselors, for instance, for all the Learning Alliance campuses. We go in as needed. We do all of their processing, even of their local applications, their international applications, handling their transcripts. But do we have a counselor present in their office throughout the week? No. They go in as needed,
Right.
but otherwise we work remotely. So, taking advantage of modern day facilities and practices.
Makes sense. And how does this work really? मैं कहता हूँ जी मेरा एक बेटा है जो कि I don't know 16-year-old है और 14-year-old है. He's in O levels and I mean है नहीं I'm too young for that, but let's assume है. और मैं कहता हूँ कि यार अच्छा I'm watching this conversation and I'm thinking, what am I doing with his life? So maybe I should get in touch with Shanza and figure out how I can sort of build his career, right? What do they do? Do they contact your office?
So
do they start some
contact-
sort of a testing? How does that work?
So they contact our office, and the first thing we will ask them to do, if they have not decided on a career path already, and even if they have, one question we will ask the parents, and the parents are a key part of this conversation. And I think oftentimes many schools miss out on that because they're just talking to the student in a silo from what the financial circumstances at home would be, what the aspirations and conversations at home would be. So that's very important to incorporate into this process. But the first step that they will do is psychometric testing even before I will see the student.
Right.
Or anybody from my
And
office.
this is
will
all
see them.
online?
This is online. So we would essentially send them the links.
Right.
The students will take those tests, they're free.
Right.
And would send us the results.
Right.
And in the first conversation, we have what we call, it's a free consultation. So anybody can have this consultation where we talk through, okay, this is what is coming out from the results. These are key strengths and weaknesses of the particular child. Maybe they're coming out to be creative, maybe they're coming out to be entrepreneurial. What is their motivation to do something? So I give this example often. If you wish to pursue medicine, my brother will unabashedly say, it's a great profession to make money. But I also have a cousin who will say, okay, this is a profession I feel I can actually make a difference in people's lives.
Right.
So you can do the same profession, but they would be separate motivating factors. So what is the motivating factor that drives that child? And so we would have this conversation and discuss the analysis with the student as well as the parents. And we would come to a consensus, okay, let's take this particular career. These are many recommended careers which are coming out, but let's pick one. And over the course of the next year, we would give that student opportunities for internships, volunteer work, as well as academic and research programs related to that particular field. After the course of a year, the student will come back to us and can have 2 responses. Ms. Shanza, this is exactly what I wanted to do, and let's go down this road. Or they can come back and say, you know what, this is not for me.
Yeah.
And I find this increasingly in the medical profession because, particularly आप कह लें आजकल के जो burger बच्चे हैं, they grow. If you go to the schools, and once again, I compare it, when I went to convent, it is a very stark environment. You have the bare necessities versus the school nowadays have amazing facilities.
Yeah, sometimes it's better than home.
They are air conditioned, and this is taken as part of due course. It's supposed to be like this.
Yeah.
I believe convent still does not have an air condition. So, when they go to a public hospital and are doing a shadowship over there, I have students who within a week will contact me and say, Ms. Shanza, आपने हमें कहाँ भेज दिया है? The smells over here, इतनी गर्मी है. It's so unsanitized and unsterilized compared to what these students have been in. Now keep in mind, I say the word shadowship because if you're planning to go in medicine or in the dental field, no hospital is going to let
You
a
touch
high
anything.
schooler
Yeah, of course.
come anywhere near you,
Right.
at this particular stage. But it's a shadowship. So they're, either tailing a doctor or perhaps a nurse as they go about their work. And that allows them to see the environment. And even that environment often now comes as a shock to these kids. So when you tell them, hey, some of our best medical institutes are public medical institutes. If you go to King Edward or if you go to Fatma Jinnah, they have public teaching hospitals. This is the environment you will have to operate in. And they become all flabbergasted. Nahi, you expect us to work in these conditions? And I was like, yes. And so then the conversation might pivot. If they are still keen to pursue,
if they're genuinely passionate about it,
medicine or biology or the sciences, we can talk about maybe bioengineering, or we can talk about biotechnology, or we can talk about pure biological research. So other options if they don't want to be in that space. Others will come back and say, you know what, Ms. Shanza, this was so inspirational. I saw somebody saving a person's life, and this is exactly what I want to do. But that on-ground experience allows you to see whether this is a profession you want to go down towards or whether you want to pivot and experience something else. So if you start this process in class 9 or in class 10, you have sufficient time to experience the different options. If you wake up in A1 or worse yet, A2, when sometimes students do come to us, then it is too late because you have to work with what you have. I can't say I wish, we could turn the clock back and you had done this. And I think what students don't realize, apart from the US, when you're applying to other countries, so just as a caveat, Muzamil, we don't apply, or we don't just, our students don't apply just to the Ivy Leagues. We have a best fit model, and it's a global model.
Right.
Looking at what would work best for the student anywhere in the world, in conjunction with what are the top universities in this field, and where can I get the most financial aid? I think as a parent, these are the two critical things. How well ranked is a program? How much money do I have to spend on it?
Right.
That any parent, that's a calculus that they're going to make. So we keep a global approach on that. And for the rest of the world, if you're looking at the UK, if you're looking at Canada, if you're looking at Australia, if you're looking at Singapore, when you apply for any program at the undergrad level or at the grad level, you are applying against a particular course. If you say I'm applying for finance, you get accepted. Let's say you applied at King's, you got accepted, then you will be doing finance. You cannot go there and say, you know what, I changed my mind. Even if you're thinking in the same family, I should have taken finance and economics. You don't have that maneuvering space. And I find that most Pakistani students have simply not thought this through. They're doing what their perhaps elder cousin or their sibling or a relative told them कि ये अच्छा कोर्स है तुम्हें कर लेना चाहिए. But without having explored, is this the best fit for them?
अगर आपने पैसिव इनकम के बारे में परेशान है, खासकर आजकल की इकोनॉमी में जहां पर ऑलरेडी कैश कंटिन्यूअसली बर्न हो रहा है और इन्फ्लेशन हमें मार रही है, तो आई एम प्राउड टू अनाउंस दैट दिस वीडियो इज इन पार्टनरशिप विद सरमाया फाइनेंशियल्स. दे आर ऑफरिंग 2 वेरी कूल ट्रेनिंग्स. कैपिटल मार्केट फंडामेंटल्स, जिसमें आप स्टॉक्स और म्यूचुअल फंड्स में इन्वेस्ट करना सीखेंगे और अंडरस्टैंड करेंगे कि आखिर एक कंपनी के अंदर क्या ऐसे फंडामेंटल्स होते हैं जिनको आपने देखना होता है टू फिगर आउट कि वो एक अच्छी कंपनी है टू इन्वेस्ट इन. और दूसरी ट्रेनिंग है टेक्निकल एनालिसिस मास्टर क्लास, जिसमें आप सीखेंगे कि किस तरीके से हम डिफरेंट ट्रेडेबल एसेट्स लाइक कमोडिटीज, फॉरेक्स, स्टॉक्स, क्रिप्टो के अंदर थोड़े से पैसे लगाकर बहुत ज़्यादा पैसे बना सकते हैं. पर्सनली ये ट्रेनिंग मैंने भी ली है एंड इट्स एब्सोल्युटली फिनोमिनल. द लिंक टू द ट्रेनिंग्स आर इन द डिस्क्रिप्शन बिलो. चेक देम आउट एंड बिकम फाइनेंशियली हेल्दी. एंड नाउ बैक टू द पॉडकास्ट. मेक सेंस. ऑफ टॉपिक स्लाइटली, बट मुझे ये बताएं कि हाउ डू यू सी द इम्पैक्ट ऑफ द करंट फाइनेंशियल क्राइसिस ऑन students pursuing their education abroad? And I say this with the with context of a lot of students who've reached out to me over the last year, particularly जब दरमियान में मेजर ब्लॉक्स आए थे. अभी तो दरमियान में फिर भी थोड़ी सी स्पेस बेहतर हो गई है. जब वो था कि जी हमारी फ़ीस जानी है और डॉलर नहीं जा रहा, and I'm sure you must have heard a lot of that as well. And so that really we're beginning to see a lot of fundraising activities happening on Twitter as well now, where students are desperately trying. And मुझे बड़ा अफसोस भी होता है, people make a lot of fun of those kids के यार तो ना जाओ अगर तुमने वो नहीं किया, but वो बेचारा वो छोटे बच्चे हैं, उनके पर्सपेक्टिव से it's not their fault that they were handed such a horrible card, right? A lot of times these kids had it all figured out, and then the economy tanked, and now they can't afford. I mean, they could have afforded that a year ago if older folks had worked better in their context, right? And so, unfortunately, it's not their fault, but it is what it is. And I think as for a few years, there's going to be a blip there where the numbers are going to aggressively dip. What are your thoughts on it?
So I would say it's country specific. Amongst the O and A level students, generally speaking, America is a very attractive destination. That's because the US gives a lot of financial aid to undergraduates. The UK does not, Canada does not. They're financially stingy countries when it comes to undergraduate level funding. Whereas the US gives financial aid on the basis of need. And that is very attractive for Pakistani students. When you see students getting, 55K or 60K per year, keep in mind that for the most part, this is not merit-based. This is need-based. And need will be calculated on the basis of a family's income that they declare, and they have to give their taxes and income statements in support of that. So the vast majority of Pakistani families qualify for very generous need. Now, what has happened is that, once again, there are 100 or so universities in America which give need-based aid to international students. So the level of competition for those universities is extremely high. That's one. Number two, even with generous financial aid, the question you were saying, I've had students who with 80% scholarships are still unable to make their way to the US because of the currency depreciation. My advice to students is, rather than keeping any one country as, your target country, keep a global approach once again. So if you want to do engineering, for instance, I would say you look at what are the top 100, top 200 engineering universities in the world. You should see what, your BATNA is or what your alternative is. Agar aap Pakistan mein hote, your highest rank university for engineering is NUST. It's ranked around 280 globally. So I tell my students, let's say, hypothetically, you can get into NUST, which, by the way, is a very, very competitive university to get into. But let's say hypothetically, you have a seat over there. Your goal should be to get into a university ranked better than NUST, where you're paying less than NUST. How do you do that? So if you go through the list of universities for engineering, and there are two organizations which are known for ranking universities globally. One is Times Higher Education, the other is the QS World Rankings. And I can tell you, you will see many options in Asia and Europe. You will see at least 6 universities of Hong Kong in the top 150, including University of Hong Kong, including Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, and so on. And these universities give 100% scholarships. But not only do they give 100% scholarship based on grades, Pakistan has MOUs with their government where they can access scholarships like the Belt and Road Scholarship, which not only give you tuition, but a stipend in addition to that. Similarly, there are universities in Turkey, in Malaysia, in Korea, where you can access these fully funded scholarships. When you keep a global approach, you will obviously find many American universities in there, and I'm not telling students not to apply there. But if you keep a global approach, your chances of getting into a university ranked higher than where you would vis-a-vis the US and pay less than that is going to be statistically much, much higher. And so the issue becomes the mindset of the Pakistani parents, and this is what I run into a lot. If I give the example of economics, which is what my degree in, there's a university in Italy by the name of Bocconi, which is ranked 16th in the world. But if I tell a Pakistani family, hey, you may consider applying to Bocconi, it has 100% merit-based scholarships, They're like, हमने तो बकोनी का सुना ही नहीं है. And that's where you run into a
So
problem.
they're really stuck on a very, very small percentile of opportunities.
Yes.
And so effectively what you're saying is you don't necessarily see a dip in the students. You may see a divergence of where they might end
Yes.
up.
Yes.
But it's really dependent on whether students actually are able to pursue and expand their horizon. Within the same breath, how would you see, if we're particularly talking about the US, how would you see student loans? Pakistan mein, there is this inherent aversion to student loans. Indians don't do that.
Yes.
And you'd find a lot of them actually going to the US, studying on loans. Somehow their risk appetite is higher, where they're saying कि भाई ऐसी की तैसी किस्तियाँ जलाएंगे, अब हम करके निकलेंगे यहाँ से. And in a lot of ways, what I find is because that GDP is higher, as long as you're doing it in a structured way, you're not doing it completely haphazardly, it's not a very, the thought isn't that out of the world. मैं नहीं कह रहा आप फिल्म पढ़ लें स्टूडेंट लोन के ऊपर, बट आप स्टेम में बहुत सारे एरियाज़ हैं जहाँ पर आपको हायर अपॉर्चुनिटीज़ एग्जिस्ट करती हैं. आपको पता है कि यार मैं ये करूँगा तो आई विल लैंड इन एन एक्स टाइप पोजिशन विच विल पे मी वाई अमाउंट, एंड मेरी जी अमाउंट ऑफ लोन जो है वो उसमें से निकलता रहेगा. एंड सो आई विल स्टिल बी एबल टू क्रिएट अ हायर इम्पैक्ट इन माई पर्सनल लाइफ और माई प्रोफेशनल जर्नी than what I would have had if I just completely let go of this opportunity altogether. So what are your thoughts on that?
So it's a correct observation, particularly at the graduate level. I see many more Indians landing positions at top universities in the US compared to Pakistanis. And it's not just about the risk appetite, Muzamil. I think a key question is access. I have students approaching me and asking me, where can we get the loans to finance our education? And the fact of the matter is that opportunities are severely limited in Pakistan. You have certain organizations, if you're targeting country specific like the US, applying to perhaps the Fulbright, which is once again is a very limited number of seats when you look at it overall, or the Aga Khan scholarship, which is half loan, half grant. But our banks do not give student loans the way that the Indians have actually created an entire market around this, because this is a question that you should be asking a banker, that why have they not created this opportunity
it's
for
a theoretically a dollarized loan. It's good money for the bankers as well. But what about loans from within the US? So my understanding is that there are ways to break down your structure. A lot of Pakistanis, the way that I see it, they shut down on, उन्होंने ना अपने दिमाग में ऑलरेडी बैरियर्स बनाए हुए हैं, और ये सिर्फ इस चीज़ के स्पेसिफिक नहीं है, वो हर चीज़ के स्पेसिफिक हैं. मैं आपको इस तरह की एग्जांपल देता हूँ. मैं अभी रिसेंटली दुबई गया हूँ. मेरे इर्द लोग थे, वो सर खुजा रहे थे, एंड द ओनली थिंग दैट दे कुड कम अप विद इज कि यार ये तो था ही ना, अमीर था तो इस वजह से, तो इस तरह के लोग तो कर ही लेते हैं. अच्छा मैं नहीं था, ठीक है, मैं अल्लाह का शुक्र, आई एम प्रिविलेज्ड, आई एम गुड, बट मेरे पास क्रेजी मनी नहीं है, या मैंने पापा को नहीं कॉल की कि पापा प्लीज़ करवाएं कुछ. I am someone who likes to look at hacks, and hacks do exist, and hacks are not illegal.
Yeah.
These are systematic things available for you to grasp onto that opportunity. And what I find is people from India, people from China are very much better aware of these sort of tools at their disposal. So अमेरिका में अगर फॉर एग्जांपल कोई बच्चा जाता है तो वो कहता है यार जब तक मेरे पास एक्स अमाउंट ऑफ या तो फाइनेंशियल एड आ जाए, स्कॉलरशिप आ जाए, या मेरे पास मैं इतने पैसे जोड़ के मैं जाऊँगा, तो वो पूरी ज़िंदगी अपनी गुजार देता है ये सोचने में कि मैंने ग्रेजुएट स्टडीज़ करनी है. पहले तो मैं पाकिस्तान में बैठा हूँ, मैं वेट करूँगा मेरी मिडल ईस्ट में जॉब लगे, और वो एक्स अमाउंट की जॉब होनी चाहिए ताकि मेरी इतनी सेविंग हो ताकि मैं ग्रेजुएट. अच्छा इंडियन क्या कर रहा होगा, वो यहाँ बैठा हुआ होगा, वो कहेगा कि सर पहले अप्लाई करो, अप्लाई करने के बाद वो घुसेगा, घुस के वो देखेगा कि नंबर क्या है, उसको कहेगा 20 घंटा जो मिल रहा है उस पर मेरा इतनी मिनिमम वेज जॉब के ऊपर ये कॉस्ट तो मेरी उसमें से निकलेगी. फिर मैं बाकी का देखूंगा कि यार अच्छा मैं कोई फाइनेंशियल एड अप्लाई कर सकता हूँ, उसमें क्या परसेंटेज निकलती है. फिर वो कहेगा यार ठीक है, चूँकि मेरा एक प्रोबेबिलिटी है कि मैं ये लेट्स से मैं टेक का मैं मास्टर्स इन लेट्स से सॉफ्टवेयर इंजीनियरिंग कर रहा हूँ, तो मेरा हाई प्रोबेबिलिटी है कि मैं जॉब पे लग जाऊँगा, तो मैं इतने अमाउंट का वहाँ पे किसी बैंक से लोन अप्लाई कर लेता हूँ, और मैं उनको जाके वो फिर 10 उसके तरीके का आ रहे हैं कि आपने किसको कोलैटरल रखना है नहीं रखना, वट एवर. बट दैट्स माई थाट के, एंड आई अंडरस्टैंड अ लॉट ऑफ पीपल डोंट हैव द एक्सेस टू दैट इन्फॉर्मेशन, राइट. What are your thoughts on how's your experience been, and do you think that is something where you guys help as well, where you're saying, listen, let's build your financial model and see how we can achieve your goal.
So finances is a key part of the conversation. As far as the US is concerned, one is we make sure, or we try to make sure as much as possible, that the academics and extracurriculars land you in a place where you are at receiving the top level of funding. And then we talk about the gap. So let's say that gap is 20 to 30K. The first thing we teach our students, please negotiate your financial package. Students think कि उनको letter आया है and that letter is fixed in stone. And I see even with the schools that we work in, Pakistani students are so hesitant to negotiate. They think कि जी अगर हम ये issue raise करेंगे with the financial committee कि हमारा offer rescind हो जाएगा. So that's the first misconception, and I want to put this out there. They are not going to retract your admission letter if you ask them for more money. Now, there are strategic ways to ask for more money. I went through this just this year with my own daughter. So, she, alhamdulillah, got accepted in several places. And we played the universities against each other.
Right.
Which is, if we ask one university, this is what she's getting from the other and it's higher, and you share your offer letter, the other one will match it. The reason for this is as follows. Universities don't want their yield rate to be affected, which is basically, एक दफ़ा वो आपको admission offer कर दें, it is in their interest to have you go there, because otherwise that affects their rating. Right. That affects their yield rate. And so you are then in a position of power. But हमारे students बहुत hesitate करते हैं to ask for that financial aid. So you can negotiate. I actually know a student who had terrible grades. And so, that's another question I got. You keep talking about kids who are academically gifted, who are doing well. What about those of us who are not? And so this kid had D's and E's, literally. And even I was apprehensive कि America में where is this kid going to go? Because in the UK with foundation program, anyone can go. But where is he going to go in the States, which he's so enthusiastic about going? एक तो his narrative was so compelling. So that's where his personal statement comes into play, that he caught the eye of at 3 universities, College of Worcester, Knox College, and one more, who not only offered him admission, the first one offered him $50,000 in scholarship. And then he took that offer letter to the second one and effectively played his way up to a great financial offer.
And this is a kid with D's and E's.
This is a kid with D's and E's.
Interesting.
So, एक तो है, first of all, negotiate your financial aid. Number 2, look at what your work-study options are. Particularly for undergraduate students, these are, undergraduate in America requires a lot of effort. And frankly, I don't think the A-level program prepares you sufficiently for it. So I would not advise working off campus for students, particularly the first year. So look at on-campus work-study opportunities. I did that myself.
कोई like library or
आप library में काम कर लेते हैं, आप cafeteria में काम कर लेते हैं. That's another hesitancy that kids don't want to get their hands dirty.
Yeah.
Which I think we need to get out of that mentality, which, by the way, differentiates once again us from the Indians. The Indians have no such problem.
Whatever it takes.
Whatever it takes to get the work done. The third is जो आप जिक्र कर रहे हैं, this aversion to loans. Now, Muzamil, the feedback I hear is as follows, and frankly, I respect it. It's not simply about access to loans, because the university will give you access to some kind of loans from the university itself. But then the narrative comes into play कि यहाँ पे interest की बात आ जाती है, and we don't want to take interest loans because of Islamic reasons and so on. Which as I said, I respect that narrative. So the idea is you target universities where the fee structure, let's say you are an average student, you don't have the grades. They are now highly ranked universities where the cost of education is 1/10 that of America, 1/10. Let me give you an example. Stockholm School of Economics. It's ranked number 40 for economics globally. And the tuition cost of the university is 10,000 euros a year. This is without any kind of scholarship. They have both 50% scholarship as well as 100% scholarship.
Euro is what these days? 340 maybe?
roughly
Give or
around
take.
that ballpark.
So that's 3.4 million for a year.
For a year, and it's a 3-year program.
Interesting.
Compare this to an American private university cost, which is between 80 to 100K.
Yeah.
per
That's
year.
like 2-2.5-3 करोड़ रुपया तो कहीं नहीं गया आपका ट्यूशन में. हाँ.
अच्छा, ये तो मैंने आपको स्टॉकहोम की एग्जांपल दी. अब आप आ जाएं टर्की पे, या आप आ जाएं मलेशिया पे. University of Malaysia, which by the way is ranked for most subjects in the top 100 in the world, उनकी tuition fee is $6,000 per year without any scholarship, and they have many scholarships you can avail. अब आप आ जाएं टर्की पे. टर्की पे you will have public universities which are ranked better than private universities with a tuition fee of $2,000 to $3,000 a year. So this is
And
where...
these are English language universities.
So the Turkish universities, most programs are in Turkish. The private universities are in English.
Right.
Now, this depends on two things. आप कितनी highly ranked university को देख रहे हैं, and two, what is your budget?
Right.
So I find that students who are coming from the intermediate stream, the FSC stream and so on, have no issues even taking a year of Turkish language and doing a program in $1,000.
Right. Whatever it takes.
Whatever it takes.
Yeah.
If you want to do it in English, you'll find it in $4,000, $5,000.
Right.
So, there are some... It also depends on your grades. If you have the grades, then you
This
can
is
land full
interesting. So
scholarships.
you're effectively saying that a lot of these FSC students can actually avail higher ed. जी तो पाकिस्तानियों ने तो दिमाग बंद किया हुआ है ना कि यार मैं FSC तो मैं तो जी सिस्टम से ही बाहर हो गया. But you're saying that at a very, I mean, $1,000, $2,000, that's less than lumps fee,
Yes.
effectively, right?
Yes,
So
it is.
And they can actually avail a world-class program. उसमें दरमियान में एफर्ट की गेम है, वो तो उनके ऊपर है कि वो एफर्ट दरमियान में थोड़ी सी एक्स्ट्रा डाल लें, बट दे कैन एक्चुअली ग्लोबलाइज देमसेल्व्स एंड द सोशल मोबिलिटी देयर इज जस्ट गोइंग टू बी एब्सोल्युटली इनक्रेडिबल. ओके, मुझे एक ये बताइएगा, एंड आई एम गोइंग टू सॉर्ट ऑफ थोड़ा सा मैं साइड पे होऊंगा इस कॉन्वर्जेशन के, एंड देन आई circle back later on. We've spoken, obviously, a lot of people who might be listening, we've spoken about a 3% of Pakistan, right? This is inherently the top 3%, even more so. जो O levels के बच्चे होते हैं, less than 1% of all high school graduates in Pakistan, probably much less अगर हम out of school को भी डाल दें. तो I want to talk not just about not about your program. I want to talk about generally based on your experience in the development sector. You've worked extensively in the poverty alleviation side as well. If you can quickly run me through a summary of you graduating from Emory and then all of what you did. Again, summary because you did quite a lot. And then I'll ask the follow-up question.
So that's a very broad question, Muzamil. I'll try to condense it as much as possible. But after Emory, I spent 1 year at the Federal Reserve Bank in Atlanta. I was working on the macroeconomic and fiscal side. I continued this with the World Bank in Washington, D.C. as a junior professional associate. After almost a year and a half, I asked them to transfer me from D.C. to Islamabad because I got married. यहाँ पे I continued working with the World Bank, also in the field of economic management, primarily looking at expenditures and how the government spends, how their budgets are made, and so on. And then I shifted over to the Asian Development Bank, which is where my work really started on poverty, and looking at the key programs that the government has and the key safety net programs that the government has, such as the Zakat program, the Baitul Mal program, the different microfinance programs that were going on, and got really involved in this space. Initially, some of the bigger programs were the Benazir Income program, afterwards became the Asas program. So got involved in this domain. And that's really where my interest got more towards the social sector. So both related to education as well as to health. I've done a lot of work in this field. More recently, I've been involved particularly in the technical education and vocational training space, the TBT space, as we call it. And, this is where when you talk about what makes a difference to the 97% of our country, I think this is the space, the TBT space, which is just simply not harnessed properly in Pakistan, where our education system is not aligned with some of the best Scandinavian countries who are doing so well in education, and what we have to learn from them.
Makes sense. And agar main chale Scandinavia, that's I don't know, I wouldn't even call that a dream at this point in time. That's just a utopia. But if I were to compare somewhere closer, China elevated 600 million people out of poverty, or even more so. India is on the rise, and they're doing a phenomenal job. आप उनको 10 चीज़ों पे blame कर लें, but if there's one thing they did right was education. There are a lot of studies on that. Quite simply, let's start with this. What's there in our education system, the public education system, where most of the kids go? I'm not even going to go into the whole out of school children problem.
No.
What's there that's not creating the relevant worker of the future? And isme again, I'll add the additional context of we've been so stuck on this idea कि यार हम बस वो कुछ basic set of things सिखा देंगे और आगे इंडस्ट्री दुनिया ये सिखा देगी. हालांकि अब आ रही है दुनिया where we're now descending upon the age of AI, where by and large most of the sort of redundant work is going to be automated for most part across the world. And if you really want to utilize your human mind for relevant work, it requires problem solving and it requires critical thinking. एक होता था कि हमारा करिकुलम अपडेटेड नहीं है. मुझे तो ये डर लग रहा है कि हमारा तो एजुकेशन सिस्टम फ्लॉड है. मैं ये भी नहीं कह रहा इनएफिशिएंट है, वो फ्लॉड है. इट इज़ नॉट डिज़ाइंड टू क्रिएट द ह्यूमन्स ऑफ द फ्यूचर. वर्क से भी मैं बात नहीं कर रहा. It is not designed to create the humans of the future who can live in the world that is about to be created. What are your thoughts on that?
Muzamil, I unfortunately would have to agree with many of your statements. काफ़ी narrative जो है public में, इसके ये O and A level students, उनके पास opportunities हैं जो 97% of the country does not have. When I look at the O and A level curriculum, I am worried even for these kids, because even that standard of education has descended into rote learning. I don't know if you've noticed, but every second student now has A stars and A's.
Yeah.
How is that happening?
वो एक past paper structure रट्टा hack.
Right, the hack.
Yeah.
And so our system, whether it is the OA levels, whether it is the public education system, puts a premium on grades, not on learning. And the learning that is there is still, the curriculum emphasizes and puts a premium on those who are rote learning. Today's आप कह लें education system is supposed to be putting into play critical thinking, creativity, research. None of those elements you will find either in the OA level, really, or locally in our public education system. You ask me what is the problem. I think the problems have been regurgitated and put up by every other person, whether in the government or out. People know the problems, whether it is the quality of teachers, and I can talk about teacher training and the issues around that, whether it is the curriculum, and there's a lot of controversy around the curriculum, and we can get there. Let me just say that the curriculum is nowhere where it ought to be. Then let me talk about the students, the facilities that are there at the public institutes, or frankly are simply not there, the level of labs that are needed. And then the quality of students being produced, which, this is a statistic that your audience may or may not be aware of. This is by the HEC, in fact. There are 4,000 PhDs that are unemployed just who graduated last year. So at the highest level, this is not from your public system, this is not a student who did their metric or their intermediate or their bachelor's. This is a PhD.
This is the top of the food chain. This is as...
This is,
Yeah.
they made it all the way.
Yeah.
What is their fault? Why are they not being employed? That is because the education being imparted to them is not of the quality and the relevance to what the industry needs. आपने जिक्र किया AI का, आपने जिक्र किया IT का. Any field right now, combines these phenomena into their industry. And if they are not being taught side by side with whatever other curriculum the student may be studying, then that student is redundant or is simply not going to be factored into the market. I actually have several students who come to me who've done their MPhil and masters from colleges around Pakistan, and they ask me for assistance in applying for a PhD program overseas. When I look at their level of work, and I'm not talking about simply the grammar or the English required, which, by the way, if you are doing your PhD or you've done your masters, should be at a basic level. And if you're applying for a PhD and you can't put together a simple proposal, then there is something inherently wrong in the way that we are teaching. The other, I think, part I would once again want to highlight is the lack of skills-based education, which frankly I think with the numbers we have in Pakistan is what we need. So we really need to get a lot of our students inherently learn skills in, once again, the industry they have an aptitude for. And frankly, I will say this should not be in the domain of the public sector.
Why do you think we haven't been able to do this? I mean, we've seen the TAFTAs of the world, and we've seen, it's just पत्थर उठाएं और एक नया यूथ प्रोग्राम निकलता है हर गवर्नमेंट में, हर उसमें वो कुछ हो नहीं रहा उसका, मतलब कुछ हो नहीं पा रहा.
मुज़म्मिल, आपने जाके देखे हैं इनको on ground?
I unfortunately haven't.
So let me tell you,
Right.
because I've had the privilege of visiting at least 30 TEFTAs and PVTCs across Punjab. They have huge buildings, but the teachers that are teaching the curriculum are the same teachers that probably were teaching 30, 40 years ago. And the curriculum that they're teaching is still that was being taught 30, 40 years ago. There is a Technical Institute of Technology in Lahore, which is supposed to be perhaps the only one in all of Punjab. If you go and visit it, you will see machines that were given or donated to us in the 70s. आपको एक बड़ी सी printing machine नजर आएगी, which is huger than this room and simply closed off and not being used. And when you ask the students कि जी आप फिर technology in machinery पे कैसे सीख रहे हैं, they're like, we learn theoretically from the book. And you tell me that if students are not being taught on current equipment, current technology, how are they going to go out and get absorbed in the industry? So, I mean, the curriculum being taught at these TEFTAs, the quality of teachers that are there, the facilities that are there, I frankly think that this is a space best left off to the private sector, because there is a need. There is a drastic need for these youth programs, but it simply does not belong in this space.
Makes sense. Beyond education, though, we're now unfortunately once again in the midst of our Nazuk mode. Seems like a lot of that, there are a lot of those in our trajectory. Generally, हम पाकिस्तान में बात करते हैं ना, जो top 3%, people like you and I, we sit in our drawing rooms and we talk about how can we, the way that we see Pakistan, and we try to envision a great Pakistan. It's a little tone deaf. बिकॉज हम जाते हैं अमेरिका और हम कहते हैं यार काश पाकिस्तान ऐसा होता, और पाकिस्तान ऐसा नहीं हो सकता, साफ सी बात है, क्योंकि पाकिस्तान 25 करोड़ का है और उसमें बहुत सारा अभी पाकिस्तान जो है वो अभी हमारे पाकिस्तान से भी बहुत नीचे है, और पहले उसको शायद हमें कैचअप करना है एंड देन शायद हम आगे जा सकते हैं. एंड इन अ लॉट ऑफ वेज I've realized in the last 70 years history of this country, a lot of the decisions were made by people like us sitting in our drawing rooms with very little real understanding of what majority of Pakistan look like. मेरी इंडस्ट्री में इसकी एक बहुत अच्छी मिसाल मैं हमेशा देता हूँ टिकटॉक की. टिकटॉक जब आया तो हमारे इर्द गिर्द ना, आपको भी शायद सुनने में आया हो कि टिकटॉक बड़ा क्रिंज है, बड़ा अजीब है, वो तो अजीब सी चीज़ है और अजीब सी चीज़ें होती हैं उसके अंदर. जब स्टार्ट से ही आया था तो आई पीपल वुड आस्क माई ओपिनियन बिकॉज ऑब्वियसली आई एम पार्ट ऑफ द इंडस्ट्री एंड देड बी लाइक आपको अजीब नहीं लगता, ये देखें वहाँ पे लोग वायरल हो रहे हैं, रैंडम लोग हैं वायरल हो रहे हैं और आप बड़ा अच्छा काम कर रहे हैं, आपको बड़े थोड़े व्यूज़ आते हैं. और मेरा हमेशा रिस्पॉन्स ये होता था कि सर टिकटॉक आपको क्रिंज इस वजह से लग रहा है क्योंकि टिकटॉक क्रिंज नहीं है. टिकटॉक आपको क्रिंज इस वजह से लग रहा है क्योंकि पहली दफ़ा आप इस मुल्क की एक्चुअल कल्चरल डायनामिक को देख रहे हैं. एंड फॉर मी दिस इज़ द मोस्ट पावरफुल कल्चरल रेवोल्यूशन दैट हैज़ हैपेंड इन दिस कंट्री इन एवर. बिकॉज आप उससे एग्री करें या आप उससे डिसएग्री करें, आप उसको सेलिब्रेट करें या आप उसको एज अ प्रॉब्लम आइडेंटिफाई करें और कहें हमने इसको फिक्स करना है. Without the access, the first step is always to actually get the data and begin to analyze it, right? So for the first time, we're beginning to see really what mainstream Pakistan looks like. And then uske follow-up ke upar, we will then begin to integrate them and give them better, whatever, जो भी infrastructure access, whatever. But उनको हमें वो नज़र आ रहे हैं और उनको भी coincidentally through the access to this हम नज़र आ रहे हैं. So they are now beginning to aspire to something bigger than what they thought कि यार ये बस गांव है और इस गांव में हमने इस भैंस को चराना है और हम छुट्टी के ऊपर जो है ना वो पास वाली नहर जाते हैं और वहाँ पे ईद पे छलांगे लगा के जो है वो जी शावर लेकर आ जाते हैं. It's just I've spoken to so many people on that seat. I've tried to understand what is the real solution to our problems. I've heard a lot of solutions. A lot of them, in my opinion, unfortunately the nature of my job is such it's one way, so I just hear. But a lot of them, in my opinion, seem to be very very isolated into an economy के अंदर एक छोटी इकोनॉमी बना दी और हम कॉन्स्टेंटली ये बात कर रहे हैं कि AI किस तरह आएगी और टेक्नोलॉजी किस तरह आएगी और वो नई ब्रांड किस तरह आएगा और टिम हॉर्टन्स किस तरह आएगा. एंड द डिस्पैरिटी दैट आई सी with the line of Tim Horton, which is a 1200 रुपए की coffee, and the line of an atta, which is a 2400 रुपए का bag, and people dying here, but both coexisting at the same time, just sort of like it's again mind numbing, right? So with that context, मैंने एक बहुत ही weird सा grim सा वो किया है. With that context, if I were to ask you, based on your 22 years of experience in the development sector, how do you see the Pakistani crisis today? Beyond the whole Tabasco and Red Bull महंगी हो गई है and the pet food is a little more expensive than it ought to be. What is really, or how do you really help the ordinary Pakistani, the 97%, in a top-down way where you can take certain policy decisions that may create some impact in the long run?
Muzamil, it's a difficult question because I see institutional failure. And I see it across the board, and I see it across sectors. The solution that you are asking for requires the different institutional structures, the government structures, to work in collaboration. And in the absence of that, there is going to be no targeted solution for the person sitting at the bottom. Any program, including AI वगैरह, it's easy to give certain projects that may work in isolation, but everything is connected, particularly at the policy level at the top. If you start talking about, I think these EdTech programs, so for instance, in terms of creating access to people throughout the country, for any particular education program, I think, there's some educational institutes, EdTech institutes, who are doing an incredible job. You look at people like Nirpair, you look at people like the Noon Academy, even in terms of prepping students for civil service examinations and so on. I think the access that they've had is phenomenal. Now, you can take that model down, and which is what India does, and get that into the phones of the people in any rural area. But the problem is that this requires very close coordination amongst different ministries, different structures of the people sitting at the top. We simply do not have that. In terms of, if you gave the example of India and China and them taking people out of the poverty. The bottom line for that for me as an economist is economic growth. And economic growth is contingent on many other things, structural reforms that will have to take place. Once again, we are hampered by political considerations, populist considerations, which do not allow anyone sitting in that seat to make the decisions that need to be made. And therefore, when you ask me what is going to be that silver bullet solution, I don't see that solution taking place. So I actually see each successive government kicking the can down the road, passing the buck on to the next person to just pick up. Where does that leave everyone else? People work in silos and do what they can. You're doing what you can of spreading awareness by sitting across the table and asking questions. I do what I can, working with, maybe a few hundred students and so on. Large term change is going to happen, or large impact is only going to happen by big level policy decisions taken at the top. Us pe bhi we see so much confrontation and even not consensus. The SNC is an example of that. When curriculum change was tried to be brought about, there were people who felt passionately on both sides of the divide who simply cannot sit at the table and agree with each other. And when you have that dichotomy, how are you going to have progress? We simply cannot agree to disagree even and take certain elements and take it forward. There are many elements of the SNC I simply do not agree with. But that does not mean you stop the conversation on the curriculum, which seems where we currently are, because you have to keep taking the conversation forward.
Right. You mentioned kicking the can down the road. And there's one thing that I generally notice. It's more often than not sustainable, right? आप जब जाहिर है कि आप अगर लोन्स और इन चीज़ों पे कर रहे हैं, आप रेंट सीकिंग अगर हैं in a inherently capitalist world, if you're inefficient, you will be killed off, right? So that's how it's a basic evolutionary biology है, और उसी के अराउंड पूरी दुनिया क्रिएट हुई भी है कि जिसके अंदर आप इधर आप एफिशिएंट होंगे, आप प्रोडक्टिव होंगे, अदरवाइज यूल गो बैंकक्रप्ट. कंपनीज भी ऐसे ही काम करती हैं, कंट्रीज़ भी ऐसे ही काम करती हैं. कंट्रीज़ की एग्जांपल में अगर हम जाते हैं तो हमारे पास इंडिया में 91 का केस है, हमारे पास इंडोनेशिया का बहुत अच्छा केस इस वजह से है बिकॉज एक्चुअली अगर मैं कहूँ ना, मुझे इंडिया का शायद इतना करीब केस नहीं लगता पाकिस्तान के जितना मुझे इंडोनेशिया का लगता है. उनके पॉलिटिकल डायनामिक्स पीपल कैन गो एंड रीड अप ऑन दोज, बहुत सिमिलर थे पाकिस्तान के. कल्चरल, पॉलिटिकल, हम कहते हैं करप्शन हमारा सबसे बड़ा मसला है. Corruption, I feel like, is a symptom of an inefficient economic system. You have a better system and it fizzles away itself. उन्होंने भी एक पॉइंट आया था जब वो फाइनली ब्रेकिंग पॉइंट पे आए, तो वो एक मैं उस बिलीफ सिस्टम में रखता हूँ. मैं टोटल वो भी नहीं हूँ कि यार सब तबाह हो जाएगा, मैं ये भी नहीं हूँ कि सब बेहतरीन होगा. मैं दरमियान में कहीं पर खेलता हूँ. वेयर आई फील लाइक चीज़ें थिंग्स आर बैड, बट आई इनहेरेंटली आई ऑल्सो बिलीव कि नेचर केओस से हमेशा स्टेबिलिटी की तरफ लेकर आती है. सो दिस बेसिक नेचर का वो है जो कि चीज़ों को वो कर लेगी. सो सस्टेनेबिलिटी ऑफ एन इनएफिशिएंट सिस्टम डज नॉट एग्जिस्ट. देयर इज़ नो सच थिंग. अब हम अगर हिस्टोरिकली देखें तो जब भी हमारे ऐसे टाइम्स आए हैं जिसमें वी हैड टू मैनेज स्टफ, तो हमने इंस्टेबिलिटी देखी, और वो इंस्टेबिलिटी इसी वजह से थी. वी कुडंट एग्री ऑन स्टफ बिकॉज इट वॉज डिफ़िकल्ट. The difference here was every time we were right at the edge of where we may have imploded, and generally implosion is required for everybody to come together and say, listen, okay, fine, let's stop fighting, let's come and sit together and figure it out. We generally got a handout for some war or the other. this time around, I just feel like it's just not coming because of the global dynamics. Do you think we're at the cusp of another can being kicked down the road for another decade or two?
So, Muzamil, I don't think we are frankly going to implode. I don't think the world is going to let us implode. They simply cannot afford that given our geostrategic importance. Are we going to sit down on the table and work things out and come towards, a solution? I don't see that happening either. I see us business going on as usual. Unfortunately, the way we have been operating for the last couple of decades, and increasingly, if I was look at it in terms of a graph, going down a downwards trajectory. So I don't think that it's going to be doomsday and we're going to completely collapse. But I see us, frankly, rather than aspiring or becoming an East Asian tiger, more like a developing African nation, unfortunately.
Developing African nation, that's quite a bilkuli opposite spectrum, right? Because
yes, but it's away from the implosion as well, which is what we will completely unravel, and
But how do you bring that in the context of Asia today? Look, developing African nation in the 60s is a very different meaning. Developing African nation in the midst of the Asian century, where left, right, and center, now we're moving towards stability, where even the Middle East have realized we spend way too much money on defense. We pay dumb countries like ours a lot of money just because we have this fear of a security threat. And so they're beginning to come together and they're having their moment. They're having their European Union moment. You've got the Pacific Asian side, or the ASEAN and the APACs of the world, and they're now, sure, the minor stability, instability notwithstanding, but by and large they've understood, okay, this is what we need to do to go from the emerging economy to a developed world वाली साइड पे हमने किस तरह से जाना है. उस नेबरहुड में इस तरह का पाकिस्तान अगर वो चलता भी रहे ना, तो मसला ये, मुझे इससे मसला है ही नहीं कि हम जैसे हैं हम उधर भी रुक जाएं तो ठीक है. हमारा लेफ्ट राइट इतना आगे चला जाएगा कि we will begin to look really terrible then.
So Muzamil, I think the sad part is it's not कि चला जाएगा, चले गए हैं. I mean, look at where we are in terms of any of our social indicators compared to Bangladesh. I mean, Sri Lanka to is, at the next level, or Nepal. Frankly, we're very close to Afghanistan in some things, unfortunately. And, Bangladesh is a good country to compare ourselves with because we were at the exact same spot. And look at where they have taken themselves in terms of growth, in terms of their education indicators, in terms of infant mortality, maternal mortality, all of those indicators. Where are they today versus where are we now? So yes, we have gotten left behind. And that's where I think we're going to be, because, when you say that everybody got together and they figured out that solution, that is not where we are politically at that moment. And that is not, I don't see, frankly, any solution to this in the near-term future. I think our society has become so polarized that space for conversation, despite where we stand economically, is non-existent.
Makes
and
sense.
it's unfortunately, it's not a doomsday scenario, but
it doesn't look pretty either.
It doesn't look pretty, and I think it would be false for me to say, we're gonna come out of this and that. You're asking me for an honest answer, and I'm telling you how I see it.
Makes sense. I feel like इसमें further dwell करने की कोई utility नहीं है, so I'm gonna switch the conversation a bit. You're now very passionate about the education sector. I have a 2-year-old son, and I've been thinking about his future quite a lot, as any parent would. And it's a confusing time nowadays. पहले मुझे लगता था कि यार I went through a system and so I understand the system and so I will बकरी की तरह अपने बच्चे को भी चरा लूँगा. But now looking back I just feel like I don't know the system at all. We spoke about this earlier as well. You mentioned even the OA level system is not very conducive to the future as we are about to see. And so I'm very confused कि क्या उसके साथ करना चाहिए. We've talked about higher ed quite a lot. What are your thoughts on early छोटे बच्चों की जो education होती है? I have personally dabbled around rather erratically recently in homeschooling as well. कि वो एक मॉडल होता है of mastery learning technique where आप कहते हैं कि जी एक बच्चे के अराउंड जो basically the philosophers of the old used to study through that. And so I thought okay, if I was in Pakistan, rather than sending my child to this super expensive school, why don't I hire a bunch of tutors and just ask them to drive my son's education around that, rather than him going to a school, because मुझे लगता है कि schools bring everybody to an average, right? So they will bring the below average to the average as well, but in a lot of ways cut the wings of those flying higher. And so कभी मैंने वो सोचा, फिर मैंने सोचा नहीं यार, what about social abilities? Already दुनिया में VRs and ARs आ रहे हैं और वो वैसे ही कुछ सोशल नहीं रह गया, तो अब बच्चा बेचारा जो है ना वो स्कूल से बाहर होगा तो वो भी नहीं कर सकेगा. फिर मैं सोचता हूँ कि अच्छा, तो देन आप सिस्टम्स गूगल करते हैं तो 1000 सिस्टम्स आ जाते हैं. आपको होता है अच्छा जी नहीं, मेरे से रोट लर्निंग नहीं करानी, मैंने क्रिटिकल थिंकिंग करानी है, प्रॉब्लम सॉल्विंग करानी है. हाउ डू यू अलाउ फॉर, इट सीम्स लाइक यू ओपन अ ब्लॉग, वो जो मेडिसिन के साथ हुआ था ना वो बच्चों के साथ भी हो गया कि यू ओपन अ ब्लॉग एंड यू जस्ट इंटरनेट पे कुछ सर्च कर लिया, इसका मतलब है कि दे टेल यू ऑल द थिंग्स दैट आर रॉन्ग विद योर चाइल्ड. इट्स actually very interesting. A lot of people in my generation are going through this thing which they might label something, but med students होते हैं ना, तो first couple of years में they begin to, all of them have this thing where they come up with a fatal disease जो कोई उनको लगता है कि उनको हो गई है. You'd be surprised by the amount of people I know जिनके बच्चे हुए recently who said that I was convinced at one point that my child had Asperger's syndrome because of one thing or the other. that is, वो बच्चा जो है वो नाम में ले रहा हूँ, वो रिप्लाई नहीं कर रहा, वो स्टैक अप कर रहा है चीज़. आपने 4-5 चीज़ें पढ़ी, फिर आपने गूगल किया, आपको 15 और चीज़ें मिल गई. अब बच्चे तो बच्चे हैं यार, they're gonna do things, right? But everybody is worried that the child is on a spectrum, this is happening, that is happening. So it's a confusing time. And so what's your experience been? You've mashallah se raised 3, and you've gone through the tough time. Ab to khair wo teenagers and it's tougher, I guess. But what are your thoughts on that?
So been there, done that. And I've also learned through experience. So some interesting facts first. Early childhood, particularly ages 3 to 5, research says that whatever you throw at a child at this particular point is going to define even their learning abilities later on in their teenage years and so on. So they're really a sponge at this particular point. I've experimented with different educational systems with all 3 of mine and happy to give my input. So my middle one did the Montessori system. Now the Montessori in Pakistan is very different from the actual Montessori system that is taught in other parts of the world. We were at the US for his particular time. A key difference between Pakistan and the rest is that over here we still put students in by age. So the 4-year-olds are together, the 5-year-olds are together, whereas the Montessori system is supposed to have young learners and older learners in the same class, with the older ones acting as mentors to the younger ones. So he was in a classroom when he was 3, so there were 3, 4 and 5-year-olds in the same class with differentiated learning going on. And we think of Montessori system as something just being at the level of kindergarten, and then it stops and then you put them in regular school and off you go. But the Montessori system goes all the way till high school. And it's the same model of 3 years age groups being categorized in one class. And having seen his progression through that has been amazing. when he moved to Pakistan and sat for his entrance examination here, which is once again a very interesting thing because, frankly, you're not supposed to assess students academically at the primary level. He was put straight, instead of grade 4, into grade 5 because that's where they thought he ought to be. So I'm a big fan of the Montessori model, but it's not available here in its true form in Pakistan. My daughter, the first child, which everyone is...
The biggest experiment.
the biggest experiment. As an educationist, I threw everything at her, poor child. And really, I think every mommy and me group, every opportunity there was, and particularly Googling through, big fan of the Kumon model, which is a Japanese way of teaching children, of teaching them just one concept and not moving on to the next till they get it right. So for example, let's say mathematics. You will do addition, you will only do addition. You will do nothing else but addition till you have mastered it before you go on to another workbook, which will be of subtraction. So they will make you do work. It's by repetition till the student feels that they have really like mastered one particular thing and they can do anything and go on to the next. When I look back at how useful that's been for her, I've become a big fan of the Kumon model. Kumon, by the way, has now made its way to Pakistan. So you have learning centers here, not just the workbooks, which is the way I did it. I never took my child to a tuition center. I did it all with her at home, but our extended family says, what have you done to the poor kid? That, you know, she's now a pure academic in the sense she loves to learn. And my third child, I think by the time a parent's energy kind of also wavers off, I was more experimental. So I enrolled him in the Waldorf education system, which is a German way of learning, which the philosophy basically is, it's learning through play. And in fact, they will not even teach you how to write till you are, I believe, in 4th grade. So you don't even pick up a pencil or a pen. Imagine now trying to do this in Pakistan.
That is quite a courageous...
Yes. So because they believe that those fine motor skills have not developed, and by forcing it on a child, you're actually hampering their mental growth. And the interesting part is, so in the early years of the Waldorf system, the parent is mandated to accompany the child to school. So I went with Hamza to his school, and on the first day, I brought my laptop along. I was consulting. I thought I'd sit at the back of the classroom and I'll work and he'll do his thing. And the teacher looked at me and said, please put your devices away, first of all. The Waldorf system is completely against technological exposure. Right. So for those of us who hand tablets and devices, which is very, very common these days, they will not do so till 3rd to 4th grade.
Right.
They are not only no devices, it's very different even from the Montessori. So, in classrooms over here, you will see a lot of primary colors being used, bright reds, blues, and yellows. Whereas the Waldorf system is completely soft. You'll only see nature-based colors in the classrooms, and even their learning tools, which are toys, will be without features because it's left to the child to use their imagination. And so while the child is, learning, which is often through storytelling and dramatic-based performances, once again, something very, very unusual from our part of the world, the parents are involved in the same classroom, either making candles or knitting, and I learned so much during this process. And they make their own food at the beginning of the day. So one of their first activities in the morning is to make their own lunch.
Interesting.
So they would churn their own butter, they would bake their own bread, which are 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds being taught how to do this, and then consume it for their lunch. So there are no junk food or snacks being brought from outside. You're actually making your own food. And, frankly, it was not anything in the system, but I think I had become too old. One of the reasons I ran away, which was because the Waldorf system believes that no matter what the external environment, whether it's snowing, whether it's raining, your child will don the appropriate gear and will be outside in the elements, doing their outdoor-based play work in that particular time. And so while Hamza did not complain about anything, after being in the snow under minus 10 degrees.
And where were you during this time?
So this was in Washington, D.C.
Right.
So he was enrolled in a school in Virginia, and he thoroughly enjoyed it and he loved it. But I fear that I wasn't up to the marks after a year of this. I told my husband that this is great for him, but I simply think that I can't do this anymore. But
it's so interesting though. It's completely different to what we've ever even imagined, right?
And here is what the research says. So there is now research available which compares graduates. What happened to these children later who didn't learn to write till grade 4, right? Think to a Pakistani, कि हमने तो ABC भी नहीं सिखाया till grade 4. They didn't write that. So there must be losers in life, right? That's the natural thought which would come. And so if you look at the data of graduates and compare them to the Waldorf system, the Montessori system, and the regular mainstream system, the graduates of the Waldorf system have done phenomenally better at the college level. So if you look at long-term learning, they have done much, much better than any of the other systems.
What was the Japanese system called?
Kumon. So it's Kumon. Now, in Pakistan, you don't have most of these models available. I'm frankly a big fan of the IB system, the International Baccalaureate system. I find them to have the closest philosophy to the Waldorf, particularly in their PYP, the primary years or the early system, where learning is supposed to be more play-based and more creative rather than learning for the sake of imbibing knowledge. In fact, the true PYP system, once again, is supposed to have no assessments. You will have some schools throughout Pakistan doing testing at the PYP level, but that has turned out to be due to the pressure of parents versus what the system is actually supposed to be. So basically हमें वो
स्टार्ट से मेंटालिटी जो है कि जी एग्जाम कराओ और कोई टेस्ट कराओ और कोई स्कोर दो ताकि मैं ये कह सकूं कि मैं उस बच्चे से बेहतर है मेरा बच्चा, आप उसको अपने आप से ना वो करें.
But in terms of homeschooling also, I know many parents, particularly in the US, who are now opting for homeschooling and are doing phenomenally well as well. So I think as long as there is a mix of social activities for the child, particularly revolving around sports or performing arts, then homeschooling is an excellent option as well.
Makes sense. We're at the 1 hour, 20 minute mark as well. I'm going to wrap this up. I just want to do one small activity, circling back to the original thing that we did, where you talked about career counseling and higher ed particularly. करना मैं ये चाह रहा हूँ, I've got you here free of cost, and so might as well utilize that. I want to run a session effectively where I am a potential consumer and I want to. So मैंने आपको मैं background देता हूँ. मैंने बैचलर्स किया हुआ है कंप्यूटर साइंस में फास्ट यूनिवर्सिटी इस्लामाबाद से, और मैं मास्टर्स करने जाना चाहता हूँ. चले मैं तो अमेरिका कह रहा था, दुनिया में कहीं पे, ठीक है. Let's run that through. आप मुझे बताएं if you have any questions.
So have you done your masters from FAST or your bachelor's?
Just bachelor's.
You've done your bachelor's?
In computer science.
Okay. So the first thing that is going to come into play is the academics. It doesn't matter how much work experience you have, Muzamil, I'm sorry. And this is, by the way, a common misconception that some students have. that I've been out of the workforce, so my grades do not matter at all.
Out of college.
Out of college.
Right.
And that is not true. It will vary depending on the country that you're applying to. Canada, for instance, has a GPA requirement even in order to apply.
Right.
And most of the times you will see this GPA between the 3.0 threshold. So if you're below that, you simply can't even apply. They won't even look at the rest of the application.
Right.
So the first thing which is going to come into play is the academics. Now, in the academics, what's going to come into play is your GPA, where you were last, which is your bachelor's. So can I ask you what your GPA was? Are you comfortable with that?
Absolutely. I've shared that a lot of times on camera as well.
Okay.
My GPA was 2.3.
Okay.
And that's it. Yeah, I graduated in 4 years, but
Okay, so that's number one. My
Yeah.
second question for you would be, are you open to giving your GRE examination?
let's say yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because if you're looking, and I have students who, the reason I'm asking, I have students who come to me and who say, you know what, Ms. Shanza, please don't
Ask for my GPA.
don't ask us to give another examination. I'm too
Right.
old at this point. I've been out of the workforce. I don't want to give another examination because if I do, I will flunk.
Okay, so what's the let's take it like that as a decision tree. What happens if I do give a GRE? What happens if I don't give a GRE?
If you are willing to give the GRE, the US is open for you.
Okay.
If you're not willing to give the GRE, the rest of the world only is open for you. So
Makes
the
sense.
GRE is mandated for most of the programs in the US. You can find programs which are GRE optional, but then really you're looking at second and third tier universities. And my advice to you, Muzamil, as a potential candidate for B, and my advice to any student is, your terminal degree is what's going to matter.
And what's terminal would mean your final...
Final degree. So for example, if you're going to do a PhD after this, that would be your terminal degree.
Okay.
If you're going to be a practitioner and just stop after a master's, your master's would be your terminal degree.
Right.
If you're in business and you're going to do your MBA is going to be your terminal degree. So whichever is your last degree, that is what's really going to carry you in terms of your future employment. So
Right.
the first step, kind of circling back in terms of this process, is going to be your academics. That is really going to determine for me to figure out what are going to be the target, match, and safety universities for you.
Right.
So your GRE score, once you give it, will allow me to determine how high can we aim from where you stand. And so your GPA already puts you at a certain bar.
Right.
If you come to me and say, I am only willing to look at the Ivy League universities, I would say, Muzamil, we can apply to a couple, but I want you to know you're hitting far above your belt.
Right.
Why? Because a key factor that you should be considering for any program, you have the stats available to you. And this is where the background as the economist kicks in. We would be looking at the data for that particular program in that particular university. What is the average GPA of the incoming class? What is the average number of years of work experience for that incoming class? What is the average GRE requirement for that incoming class? So the academics, where you stand compared to where you are going to apply, is going to factor
So एक
in.
probability उसके हिसाब से आएगी.
Probability उसके हिसाब से
doesn't
आती है.
necessarily mean कि नहीं हो सकता, but ये cognizant होना पड़ेगा कि यार कम चांस है, आप कोशिश कर रहे हैं, ठीक है, कोशिश कर लें. हिट और मिस भी हो सकता है क्योंकि हिट्स हो जाते हैं, but probability थोड़ी है.
So having been on the admissions committee,
GRE make it better though? So a high, let's say a low GPA and a high GRE. So probably my question is, do people have the opportunity to bypass somehow their, मतलब ये तो हो गया ना, जो जितने भी बच्चे होंगे उनका तो हुआ हुआ है, वो कह रहे हैं यार हमने कुछ करना है कि हम लाइफ में अब हम या तो एक मिट्टी या एक रैंडम यूनिवर्सिटी जाएं, कोई साल का मास्टर्स करें, वहाँ पर अच्छा ग्रेड लें और फिर उसको यूटिलाइज करें फॉर आवर नेक्स्ट थिंग, क्वालिटी सॉर्ट ऑफ आईवी लीग एजुकेशन, या इज देयर अ वे फॉर लेट्स से GRE या some hack that I can use?
so two things. One, the reason why we would advise you to give your GRE or GMAT if you were going into business is because a good score in your GRE can offset somewhat the damage done by your GPA. Somewhat. but not completely. So this is important to realize that you are carrying that GPA with you. Now, if your GPA is a 2.3, I would say once again, Muzamil, please approach it from a global perspective, then from an American perspective. Because I can tell you certain universities around the world, and we will look at the rankings, where they would value your work experience more comparatively to just your academics. So for instance, with this GPA, I can tell you there's no point even applying to Canada.
Right.
Canada would not even look at the rest of your application.
वो उधर ही कट ऑफ कर देगा, वो ऑटोमेटेड पे कट ऑफ होके एडमिशन कमीशन कमेटी के पास ही जो है
वो बाकी पढ़ेंगे ही नहीं. You know, they just set it aside.
Right.
So UK, by the way, works across the same model. They have a 2-1, a 2-2, you know, higher honors model, but de facto they're saying the same thing. You have a certain grade requirement before your personal statement or CV is being looked at.
Right.
So US in this regard does look at your application holistically. So जो आप बात कर रहे हैं कि you know, there is a chance. Yes, this
so
is
US
where
के अंदर कनाडा और यूके तो निकाल ही रहे हैं. US के अंदर there is a chance.
There is a chance. So this is where your personal statement and your interview are going to play a very important role in getting your narrative and your story across. So just to give you an example, I had a student who once again had D's and F's, but he was able to not only secure admission into a top liberal arts college, but walked away with a very, very generous scholarship. How did this happen? Because level of competition is so high. You have A and A star students didn't get admission nahi mil raha. It was because of his voice, his personal statement, where he told such a compelling narrative that it grabbed the attention of the university committee. And so it's how you, in the US, how you package yourself.
Right.
Think of it almost like a marketing endeavor. You are marketing yourself. And so you need to explain, and you will have an opportunity, by the way, to explain why your GPA is low, but it's the rest of the value addition in terms of your work experience and your achievements and your identity that you can really zoom in on to get the attention of the US committee.
ओके सो लेट्स अज्यूम कि हम GRE निकाल देते हैं अब हम जाते हैं, और हम UK भी और कनाडा भी निकाल दिया हमने, तो अब हम जाते हैं और रेस्ट ऑफ द वर्ल्ड में जाते हैं. एंड इसमें मैं एक दरमियान में एक पख ऐड कर देता हूँ, बिकॉज आई हैव अ वाइफ एंड अ किड. आई कांट कमिट टू अ वेरी लॉन्ग प्रोग्राम. सो मैं कहता हूँ कि यार मैं कोई 1 साल का कुछ मिल जाए कोई ऐसी यूनिवर्सिटी में जहाँ पर I don't want to go to a university for the sake of university. So कोई ऐसी जगह हो जहाँ पर एक्चुअली एक लेगेसी हो ऑफ लर्निंग की, रिसर्च की. आई डोंट नो, अगेन मैंने ज़्यादा रिसर्च नहीं की हुई, बट जर्मनी का आप देखते हैं, कहते हैं जी वहाँ पे टेक इंडस्ट्री है, वहाँ पे इनोवेशन बहुत ज़्यादा ड्राइव हो रही है. इवन स्वीडन के अंदर बहुत ज़्यादा इंटरेस्टिंग काम हो रहा है. एशिया में तो मैंने कभी सोचा ही नहीं, तो आई डोंट इवन नो. सो व्हाट आर योर थॉट्स ऑन दैट देन?
So देखो, it depends on the industry. Right now, the cutting edge of work being done in technology and engineering is actually the Far East.
Really?
Yes. So most Pakistani students, if you tell them, hey, do you want to think about Singapore or actually South Korea? And they would be like, no. But if that is your field, then you certainly ought to be thinking about these universities. Now, for media, I would imagine there would be many programs in Europe particularly, which are ranked really highly. So I would be looking at those programs and countries that you mentioned. I would imagine seeing Netherlands somewhere up there for this, as well as a couple of programs here and there in the Scandinavian countries. Now, why are Scandinavian countries so attractive is because their public university system is completely free. And increasingly, Muzamil, the courses being offered and the programs being offered at the graduate level are in English. So while over here in Pakistan, there is this move towards let's do everything in Urdu, the rest of the world, why are they moving towards English, right? I mean, Germany is known for having all of their curriculum in German. It's because they want to invite people from other parts of the world and have that cultural inclusivity and diversity. And so you will notice in Germany, even in their public universities, you will notice in Italy, you will notice in Sweden, their graduate courses are increasingly being offered in English. And you know what? They're free of cost, Muzamil. So if you have an issue paying, if you have a financial issue, Germany makes a lot of sense. They have some of the best public universities, particularly, they're known more for engineering and so on. And you would only be paying a minimal living cost of 300 euros per year. It's a no-brainer to me.
Wow.
Why you wouldn't keep a global approach. Now, small caveat, and this is just something I'm going to throw in there for the information of our audience. Because of how, unfortunately, Pakistanis tend to sometimes abuse the system, what the governments of certain of these countries have done, Germany, for instance, have said that even if you get accepted into our master's program, which is free, we just want you to have a closed bank account, student account, which shows you have sufficient expenses for your living expenses and so on. So it is a closed student account where you can't use the money for other things, but they just want that assurity to know that you're actually coming here to study and are not there to kind of disappear once you are there.
Right.
So these requirements have now been introduced, जो पहले ये भी नहीं होती थी.
Makes sense. I'm going to wrap this up. I'm going to ask you one question that I ask all of my guests, and I want you to wear the development economist hat. And इसमें मैं certain चीज़ें मैं कुछ handicap कर देता हूँ guest को on certain areas. I don't want I hope in this answer. I don't want an if in this answer. And I don't want to hear about the youth population in this answer. But with all of that, all of those sort of aesthetics, yes. You've lived extensively in the US. I'm sure you've traveled extensively across multiple regions. Now you're back in Pakistan, and you're working here. If there's anything, I mean, कोई भी मुझे अगर वो करे जो आपका portfolio है उस पे it would have been far more lucrative to be anywhere else in the world, to be very honest, most certainly in the US. So one way or the other, for people who do end up coming back, I do believe it is a service to the nation. चाहे वो private sector कर रहे हैं, उनको नहीं लग रहा होगा, कहेंगे जी हम तो पैसे कमा रहे हैं, whatever, but it is a service to the nation, and particularly people part of the education sector, one way or the other, are doing a service. उस चीज़ को मद्देनज़र रखते हुए, knowing what you know now, seeing what you've seen throughout your life, how do you see Pakistan of 2050, 27 years from now, again, with those aesthetics in mind?
I see Pakistan where we are today. I don't see a Pakistan which has progressed significantly, unfortunately. And I tie this once again to the social political culture which is present right now. I don't see any particular group of people being able to switch the conundrum that we find ourselves in. And so I see things staying stagnant, unfortunately. I'm sorry to end on such a a grim situation, Muzamil,
right?
because you took away my caveats. If you had let me put in the I hope, it would have been very different.
Of course, and that's the thing, right? I think the first step towards, मैंने पहले भी ये mention किया, the first step towards reform is acknowledging there is a requirement for reforms. A lot of times the guests have been coming in and saying, I hope this happens, but I feel like now is the time to really understand where we are at right now, and then eventually the high hopes can convert into something more actionable. But Shanza, thank you so much for coming in. This was super insightful. One of my most favorite episodes in recent times. So thank you for sharing all that insight.
Muzamil, thank you so much for having me. It was lovely having this conversation.
I'm glad. And for all of you guys, thank you so much for watching. अगर आपको एपिसोड पसंद है, अपने दोस्तों के साथ ज़रूर शेयर करिएगा. मुझे नीचे कमेंट सेक्शन में आके बताएं, what are your thoughts on different education systems for young kids? What are your thoughts on higher education going outside of Pakistan to pursue such education? Personally, मुझे लगता है कि education is one aspect to it. The cultural growth the mental growth that you end up getting by not just being independent but also by being exposed to so many different cultures, so many different ideas, ideologies. उससे जो आपको growth मिलती है, that's priceless in my opinion. You really want to be a future leader. उसमें यूनिवर्सिटी तो एक पार्ट प्ले करेगी बट जो एनवायरनमेंट है वो बहुत ज़्यादा प्ले करता है पार्ट. एंड सो इफ़ यू आर इंटरेस्टेड इन, अगेन दिस इज़ नॉट अ पेड पॉडकास्ट, वी डोंट डू अ लॉट ऑफ दोस, बट इफ़ यू आर इंटरेस्टेड इन फाइंडिंग आउट मोर अपने किसी छोटे सिबलिंग के लिए, अपने लिए, maybe you're looking to go for higher ed yourself, check out these guys. The link is down below. If you guys have a link, please share that with the team and they will definitely put it down below. But anyways, this was Syed Muzamil Hasan Zaidi. You're watching Thought Behind Things. Thank you so much for watching and I'll see you in the next one.